Oh, there we have some midnight oil and US forces. Now, I didn't even plan that because I'm hoping all the technology works, and we'll just check it out now. All the way from Minnesota in the USA, I have, I'm looking across the screen here now. Michael, I know you can't see me, but I'm hoping you can hear me. Can you hear me, Michael Sullivan?
Perfectly.
Oh, wow. That sounds really good. It's like you're in the next studio.
Wonderful. I'm just assuming you're as beautiful as your voice sounds.
Oh, I am. And flattery will get you everywhere, yes. Well, mate, g'day from Western Australia, Perth in Western Australia. I'm talking this morning with Michael R Sullivan. We can obviously tell by his voice he is a young American guy. He is a software engineer by day, but also an author, having just published. Now, this is your first book, is that right, Michael?
That's correct.
Congratulations. Now,
thank you so much.
We'll talk about the book in just a few minutes, but I want to talk about, I guess, Minnesota and yourself a little bit more first. Now, for our listeners who aren't sure, because we've got listeners here in Perth and across Australia and in the UK and all over the place, and wherever you're listening from today, hello. Now, I'm correct, you're in Minnesota right now, is that right?
Technically North Dakota, but I grew up in Minnesota. I live right on the border in a place called Fargo, North Dakota. It's on the border between North Dakota and Minnesota.
Ah, right. Okay. Now, Minnesota is, for those of us who aren't really great on American geography, if you can imagine the top of America, almost in the middle, one part of Minnesota is up against Lake Superior. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, exactly.
Another border is on Manitoba and Ontario in Canada, and also North and South Dakota and Iowa. So does that sort of describe where it is? You're on one of the Great Lakes. Exactly. Lake Superior is the largest of the Great Lakes, I understand. And I believe in the area today it's been a beautiful 27 degrees. You've got summer just around the corner.
We had some negative 40s and stuff all winter long, so it's just wonderful finally having some nice weather rolling out over here.
You deserve some temperatures. You know, it's almost winter here in Perth, and that's about what we're getting at the moment, 25 or 26 degree days. I'm sorry to rub that in, but
I've made this decision. I'm used to it at this point.
Beautiful stuff. Although when I looked up the weather in Minneapolis today, there is a tornado watch, I believe. So you keep your eyes open there.
I certainly will.
Now, Michael, tell me a bit about yourself before we launch into your book, because I'm going to read out the, I guess, the blurb, the promo that's on Amazon and everything like that. But tell me about yourself.
Yeah, so currently living in Fargo, North Dakota, like I said. I grew up in a couple of different places, but mostly Minnesota. I moved to Fargo for college, ended up going to school for business, did absolutely nothing with that degree, and I ended up being a self-taught software engineer. Been doing that for the last 7 or so years, and I've always had a lot of hobbies. I'm somebody that likes to really throw myself into stuff that I do. So I just finished writing this book, but I'm also a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner, a musician, pretty fanatical about exercise and health too. And I have a handful of other things like chess that I'm really into too.
Jiu-jitsu, tell me about that.
So are you familiar with it?
Other than it's a form of martial arts, I don't really know, no.
It's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically. So it's a submission-based martial art. It was one of the foundations for the current UFC. So it's submission grappling, lots of arm bars, triangles, that kind of thing. So it's really unique in the fact where like boxing and stuff is challenging to spar at 100% because you could potentially give your sparring partner a concussion. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, you can tap out really easily. So you can train extremely hard, but be really gentle and not get injured. So it's been something I've really enjoyed throwing myself into. It's like kind of that mental challenge, but also really physical, which is nice for me because I like to keep my brain occupied.
That sounds pretty cool, but it sounds pretty violent.
There's definitely an element of violence in it, that's for sure.
Now, I take it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you've just described it there, and hailing from, I guess, this version of it from parts of Brazil. Is that right? You don't have to wax various parts of your body. It's not that sort of Brazilian, is it? All right.
No, it's not.
Now, a self-taught software engineer, what sort of software do you get involved in and writing code for?
So living in the Midwest of the United States, there's a lot of farming. So I actually work in agriculture technology. I work at a company called Bushel currently, which does agriculture technology software. I have dabbled in a couple different areas, but I've been doing that, specifically the front end, so building websites and that sort of thing, where the user is actually directly interfacing with the technology.
Is that a challenge with farmers and equipment operators and things like that, working out those interfaces?
Absolutely. And that's one of the unique areas about it, is that it was kind of one of those industries that's really late to adopt technology, whereas like tech out in the coasts was really quick. Some of the farmers have been hesitant to digitize their information and things. So there's huge opportunity here to do that. And it's been really successful. I started roughly 5 years ago at like 35 employees, and it's up to around 250 now.
Wow. So California's got Silicon Valley, but you work in Potato Valley.
Silicon Prairie is the phrase that they like
Silicon
to use.
Prairie.
I will exclusively use the Potato Valley now.
Well, you border on Iowa. Isn't that where all the potatoes come from? Or is that Idaho? I'm getting mixed. That's Idaho, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, you're doing great, honestly.
Actually, I've been to Idaho. I should know that. It's a little bit further west of where you are, isn't it? Idaho?
Yes, exactly.
Because it borders
Montana and
Alberta.
Yeah, there's a couple things to the south too.
Through
Utah.
There. Yeah. Right now, let's talk about your book. It sounds really interesting. And some of the background. But what I'll do here is, if you can indulge me, I'm going to read the promo from Amazon. And I only found out about our interview last night, so I do have to plead guilty. I haven't had time to read your book as much as I would have loved to. And
I can forgive you.
But I will very soon. Okay, here we go. The Final Flaw by Michael R Sullivan. Our flaws define us. What happens when they are gone? In the near future, genetic defects will soon be a thing of the past. Every child is born using the template, a revolutionary invention ensuring health and happiness. Its success brought about Mendelium. I hope I'm saying these titles right. Mendelium, the largest technology company in the world, which now controls humanity's genetic future via a board of directors. Charlie Lamarck, an engineer with Tourette's syndrome, is working to create a better life for future generations when he's suddenly thrust into a position of power by Gerhard Geller, an eccentric CEO who has taken a liking to him, perhaps too quickly. Charlie's differences have brought success into his life, and he's sceptical of a world without flaws. Now he faces a choice. Should Charlie work to change the future, or will he be part of the last generation shaped by their own genetic disadvantages? Compelling, genuine, timely, and unforgettable. The Final Flaw is a gripping exploration into our differences and what makes us unique as human beings. This thought-provoking novel underlines the positive of neurological diversity and paints an all-too-realistic future of the corporatization of genetic technologies. So where does it take us, Michael? It sounds like a rollicking journey.
I can't give you too many spoilers. You got to read it yourself. But it deeply explores the idea that disadvantages can be beneficial for us at an individual level and as a society. The book was something that I've been riding around with me for a very long time. I personally have Tourette's syndrome, and though the syndrome has a really wide spectrum, like for me personally, it's been really formative. Having constant tics in my life and then suppressing them really molded me into a very disciplined person, so to speak, that constant little stressor of having my body spasm outside of my control and trying to control it, really like those micro traumas constantly really shaped me. And I wanted to see if I could express the idea of how formative something like that your entire life would be in a book. And I didn't think there would be a better way to show that idea and then the story you just described.
Have you drawn a lot upon your own experience as someone with Tourette's, and just the fact that Charlie in your book is an engineer with Tourette's syndrome?
Charlie and I have quite a bit of differences, but I absolutely use big parts of myself in him too. I have read a lot. I'm a huge reader. I've read like hundreds of books over the last couple of years. I always loved reading. And I hadn't read a whole ton of good books with characters with Tourette's syndrome, at least not in the way that I wanted to see it portrayed. There's many that kind of use it as a trick to attract people or a way to invoke pity in the reader, that sort of thing. But for me, it never felt that way. I literally felt that it was an advantage in some ways. It really shaped the way that I grew as a person. And I wanted to see that in a character out there in the world. So I wrote one.
So, Michael, tell me about Mendelium. What sort of a company are they?
So they are a company defined by the template, which you read off there. It is an intersection between genetic technologies, roughly 25 years advanced where we are for right now, and then distributed software technologies. So I did a deep dive into genetic tech in writing this book, but I was also extremely familiar with software. So it's kind of the combination of the two. Getting a little bit more specific into how it works, the book takes place for about 25 years in the future. I didn't get super futuristic like things like Gattaca, if you're familiar with that science fiction movie.
Yeah.
Rather, it is leveraging what the mother's womb already does, where it's eliminating potential genetic defects when the baby is in the womb. And it just digs into the societal complications of what that might look like and kind of examines how things will look when these disadvantages start getting removed, and on a more personal level too, with Charlie and Tourette's syndrome being one of those disadvantages.
What sort of issues does it unpack? Because there's got to be a huge amount of issues there where you talk about differences bringing success to people's lives, and it's very interesting. We're talking about this because only a couple of weeks ago we had the debacle that took place at the Oscars for a very poorly placed joke about alopecia, which is a genetic condition. And a few days later, actually, I had someone on the show and we chatted for a long time about alopecia and some of the issues, and particularly the mental and the physical health impacts that can have on individuals. And I'm sure Tourette's the same. So we'll talk a bit more about the book, but we'll unpack Tourette's a bit more in a few minutes as well, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
But what sort of issues? There's got to be ethical issues. There's got to be how much we get involved with Mother Nature and some of these things. And like you say, some of these conditions are formative. What else is there?
I don't want to get too deep because there's going to be a little bit of spoilers, but the thing that is most interesting to me, and it's just an idea that I couldn't get out of my head, frankly, is the misaligned incentives where everybody individually wants their children to be happy and healthy. And if you're given that option, it's so difficult to say no. Now that's abstracted out over the longer term, you start to slowly eliminate these disadvantages, which again, on the surface, I think makes total logical sense and is a great, beautiful thing to do. But over time, that eliminates diversity in the human species. And there's overreaching side effects from that we have yet to begin to understand. And I don't necessarily voice any overarching belief on it, but I think it's extremely interesting. And I think I frankly think it's inevitable that we have this technology. It's just on the fringe of being possible. And these kinds of decisions are going to be extremely close to heart for people like me that have some kind of syndrome that's going to be eliminated potentially.
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting point you make, because I guess there's hundreds of thousands of hours every year, and probably millions, if not billions of dollars put towards medical research for genetic conditions, all with the view of trying to understand them and deal with them and minimise them or eliminate them and things like that. And I'll open up here. I have a daughter with a genetic condition where she has brittle bones, and we had no family history or anything like that, so we had no idea. But in hindsight, when you look at the choices that may be available in the future for families where there is a trait or a genetic marker turns up or something like that, it really does or would bring. Now, I'm past it. We never had to make a decision or anything like that. But, in the future, like you say, potential future parents may have a decision to make one way or the other, or they may just want to make no decision at all, and that's fine, and maintain that, I guess, that diversity and that potluck that life delivers you. But I guess humanity is working towards that. Now, it mightn't be one single big corporation or anything like that, but humanity is working towards that every day. So it's an interesting concept here, where you're postulating that the difference is a positive thing, and I agree with you. I think we'll probably never eradicate everything.
It's so nuanced, right? You can think of just infinite examples where it's like, okay, of course we want to eliminate that one, but at some point there's probably some line where it maybe doesn't make sense, or if the infrastructure exists to eliminate these things, when do you stop? I think that question alone is just a big reason that drove me to write the book.
Yeah. So look, Michael, let's unpack Tourette's a little bit here, and you talk about tics, which is a common occurrence in people with Tourette's. I guess the one thing that many of us people, and I say that us meaning people like me, our first impression of Tourette's is someone that sort of tics and swears and is sometimes that can be inappropriate and can be quite funny. But look, tell me what it's like every day living with it, and how do you manage? How do you deal with things?
So kind of like I alluded to earlier, there's just a gigantic spectrum of it. Like you mentioned, I think it's roughly 10% of people that have Tourette's syndrome have something called coproralia, which is the vocal sounds that you'll hear made, and very frequently the representation of Tourette's syndrome that you see. The giant bit of the iceberg underneath the water is the 90% that don't have that just have some kind of physical tic. I am part of that group, and I have had varying extremes of my tics over the course of my life. When I was younger, they were extremely distracting. It was constantly, I was either twitching my neck, flipping my hair, blinking erratically, or doing just other just wild movements all the time. And it was just absolutely exhausting. As I've gotten older, I've fortunately had some of my symptoms reduce, and I've found techniques or things to throw myself into that help reduce the symptoms of it, or at least make it more manageable to live with. I've also found some tics that I can sort of guide my body to, so to speak, that are a little bit less distracting for other people. But it's again such a wide spectrum, and it's so different for everybody. It's one that's really challenging to be like, this is exactly what it is, because it's so unique to each and every person.
Yeah, well, I understand Tourette's is 3 to 4 times more common in boys than girls, and it's usually diagnosed around the age of 8 or 9. When did your tics become apparent, and did you get a formal diagnosis?
I did. I do not remember exactly the year, but I think I was about 4. So my mom has told me before, somewhere on the verge right in there. It was very apparent back when I was that young.
So but just from what you said there, quite early. Also, my understanding is around 1 in between 100 and 150 children are diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. Is that right? Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding too. I think it's interesting because I personally do not know very many people that are open about it, but very frequently you'll see people that'll have some kind of tic, whether it be that there's different sorts. Not every person that has tics is necessarily Tourette's syndrome, but it's much more common than people think, but people are very closed off about it and quiet about it. I think partially, at least for me, it comes from, like, I pride myself on hiding them. It was so embarrassing when I was younger that I always tried to hide my symptoms. So as I got older, I continued to try to do that. And naturally, I wasn't very open about it or willing to talk about it very much. And I think that's that way for quite a lot of people. So the number is absolutely in that range, but people aren't as open about it as they are with other things.
How did you manage school and other kids? And we know kids can be very cruel to kids who are different. It wasn't as big of an issue as it could have been. I think people just chalked it up to me being twitchy all the time. Some of my worst ones were hair flipping, where I jerk my head, and I usually found ways to either sit in the back of the class or like find ways to distract people away from me if they were starting to notice that I was doing something funny. I would oftentimes alienate myself a little bit too if I was getting exhausted with being around people. It definitely is frustrating. I have some memories in my past where I had bad interactions from people, but overall, people have been pretty kind about it. And a lot of times people don't even know nowadays. My symptoms have gotten so much less severe than they used to be. And I've found ways to kind of reduce the tics that it's not very extreme. Looking at the notes I've got here, it also says that among the children diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, so about 5 out of 6 or over 80% are also diagnosed with at least one additional mental, behavioural or developmental disorder. And that includes anxiety, ADHD, behavioural problems, learning disabilities or anything like that. What's your experience there, Michael?
So no formal diagnosis, but I am almost certain that I have ADHD. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, I have a ton of different hobbies and things that I'm into. I throw myself into things as a way originally to distract myself from the tics. But as I've gotten older, it's kind of this thing that's stayed with me. But I'm just constantly going in so many different directions all at once. Other comorbidities with Tourette's syndrome are OCD,
yes,
autism spectrum disorder, other anxiety in general. There's a couple more as well. But it's really interesting how many of those things are overlapping Venn diagrams.
It would be a challenge if you had a menu of the other conditions and challenges there. So that would create for an interesting life. Now, Michael,
that's true.
It's Tourette's Awareness Month over here now. You don't look particularly old now, but if you were going back to a 9 or a 10-year-old Michael, and the person like yourself, and they had Tourette's and whatnot, what would you tell them?
I would certainly tell them that it gets better. Just be kind to them in the moment. As for a piece of functional advice, though, I would tell them to find some kind of activity to channel their energy into. The very first one that I found was music. And a pretty common thing, people with Tourette's syndrome, is that when you are deep into flow states, you don't tic. So I found out eventually that when I was playing music, my tics just melted away and I completely forgot about my syndrome. So that was completely transformative for me. As soon as that first moment happened, when I realized that I could just escape from my tics for moments through music, I threw myself at it. And then I continued to do that with different things. And my entire life essentially now is constructed around things that I can find flow states in.
That's really interesting. I'll just jump into there with the music and the no tics. It's also well recognised that people with a stutter, when they sing, the stutter goes away. So you can have somebody that's tripping over every second word and things like that when they're speaking. Yet when they sing, they have this beautiful angelic voice. And there's an Australian singer here who I saw a documentary on. I think it was on our ABC, our national broadcaster, and she was very awkward speaking and everything. But when she sang, it was just divine. So I wonder if there's some similarities there. Do you think?
I would certainly think so. It sounds like it.
What sort of music are you into? Playing, dancing? What's your instrument?
I play acoustic guitar and sing. I've dabbled in a whole lot of different things, but I kind of honed in on that one because I like things that were just completely flow inducing. So things that require the use of both hands. So fingerstyle guitar with percussive elements, and then singing at the same time. So I'm just like doing a bunch of different things all at once. Completely distracts me away from everything else, and that was my favorite.
You any good?
I like to think so.
You don't want to give us an audition? No,
I don't think so.
Now, the book is very recent. Now, how long did it take you to put together and write?
Just about 3 years. At least the first ideas were about 3 years ago. I started doing some journaling and idea formulating at that time. Yeah, and it came out roughly 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks. So it was a very long haul. It was a lot of refining and continuing work over an extended period of time.
Yeah, what was the process? I guess you come up with raw drafts of bits of the book or chapters or something like that, and you review them and edit them, and someone else goes through them. What's the process in getting a novel together?
The initial process was literally just trying to get it down on a page. I think the first 6 months, maybe 5 months, were just writing every single day and kind of seeing where the story went. I did a lot of freehand writing on each individual character, getting to know them a little bit better. I also kind of found the story along the way. There's different writing styles, and I very much was one where I found the story as I was writing it, which was great. I ended up really loving what came out of me, but it led to a absolutely huge amount of editing. It was over 2 years of just editing and refining it down and making sure all the pieces fit together the way I wanted them to.
Where can we get hold of the book if we want to read?
The best way to get a hold of it is on Amazon. If you just search for The Final Flaw, it should take you right there. It's in paperback and ebook as well.
That's how I found it last night. Can I read a couple of the, the reviews, what people say?
Yeah, please.
I've got 3 here, and it says, one of the best books I've ever read about the importance of neurological diversity. Would highly recommend. Another one here, the best new release book and debut author that I've read so far this year. I would definitely recommend it to anyone. Fine praise there. And the last one here is one of the best representations of Tourette's syndrome in a fiction book that I've ever read. But it's so good, I think everyone would enjoy it. So a bit of the insight there. You've obviously poured some of your own experience into the Tourette's, and to get high praise like that is amazing. So is there another book in the pipeline?
There likely will be, but it hasn't been started yet. I threw so much myself into this one. I wanted to make sure I continued to give it my all right after its release, and do everything in my power to make sure I got it out there to share with the world. Hearing these reviews, though, and every time I see them, it's been absolutely incredible. The whole time I spent working on this, I just envisioned this happening, or dreamed of it happening. You know, the fact that it is, it's just been mind-blowing.
It must be a it must be a wonderful experience for you, Michael, to have had this journey and still be going down the path. What other feedback have you had, given that it's only been a couple of weeks since your book was released?
I've had a lot more feedback along the same lines that you've mentioned. I've had a couple of posts on Reddit that have blown up where people have mentioned that they like the book. I've got to be a part of that. Some of the best ones, though, have been personal conversations with people that I've been close to. It's been nice to share it with the world, but a lot of friends and coworkers and family have read the book now too, and it's just spurred amazing conversations with them where we've talked about the Tourette's syndrome specifically, and then the nature of disadvantages and how it's impacted their lives and mine.
Were any or some of your coworkers not aware of your Tourette's?
Very many of them, yeah. Especially since I work from home a lot, and in software, people are kind of focused on their own things. So it was extremely easy to hide some of them. I even have some close friends that were not aware of it.
So what was their response where you've come out, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. It's been overwhelmingly positive. I frankly was just blown away. And it's interesting that creating something can have such a powerful effect on you. When I was writing the book, I did not really intentionally plan to come out about having Tourette's syndrome to everybody. But as soon as the release got here, I was like, I need to do this right and make sure I share this with the world in the best way possible. And yeah, released the book, was completely open with everybody in my social media and around me about having Tourette's syndrome, and just waves and waves of positive feedback and nice things from people, especially with something I've been so closed about for so long. It was overwhelmingly positive and really rewarding to share.
Do you want to be a pin-up boy for Tourette's?
Not necessarily, but I just wanted to be open and share my struggles a little bit.
I think that's a great way to be. So I've been talking this morning, or it's evening over there. It would be, 9:30 in the evening over there right now? Yep. I got my time zones right, because it's about 10:30 in the morning here in Perth. I've been talking with Michael R Sullivan, debut author and software engineer, and person living with Tourette's syndrome. He has just debuted his first novel called The Final Floor, which is available on Amazon for a very reasonable price, I might say, looking at the the notes there. But before we wrap it up, Michael, have you got any comments other than get onto Amazon and buy the book?
Man, I would be incredibly appreciative if people would do that. I threw so much of my life and my being into this book, and I genuinely think it'll be something that most people would love to consume. Outside of that, I just truly appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you today. It's been wonderful.
We might have to catch up in a couple of months and just see what more of a reception you've had. And, of course, if you've got time, once you've become rich and famous, to talk with us again. But no, it would be very special to maybe catch up in a few months and have another chat. Michael Sullivan, speaking to us from Fargo in North Dakota, but originally from Minnesota, which is almost side by side. Author of The Final Floor, available on Amazon. Mate, it's been great talking with you today, all the way across the other side of the world, and thanks for being our guest.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Now we'll jump into a quick song from Mondo Rock, and I think it really defines our discussion there. It's a cool world.